A little over a year ago, the legendary amp builder Alexander Dumble passed away, and shortly thereafter, different anecdotes and stories about the man and his amplifiers and the famous players that play them all started to come to the surface, or come back to the surface. For whatever reason, these really grabbed me, and I kind of went down the rabbit hole on researching and reading about Alexander Dumble and his amps. So much so that I decided to try to build one. Now, before I go any further, I do have to point out one resource that made this even halfway possible. I could not have even started on this project without the information and different resources that I found on a forum called the Amp Garage. Just the backlog of people asking questions and different information, and as well as asking my own questions there, really made this possible and really made it something that I could even think about doing. Through that forum, I was able to source a chassis as well as some boards, schematics, layouts, everything that I needed to get in and start building a Dumble style amp. I chose specifically the Overdrive Special number 124, which is kind of a famously built Dumble amp that a lot of people have cloned and made copies of. And so there were a lot of resources for that amp in particular, and I thought it would be a good place to start. The last thing I'll say before we jump into the rest of the video is that this doesn't serve as a technical walkthrough of building an amp. Think of it more as a bird's eye view of the process and what it kind of looks like to take on something like this. This is my third amp build, and so in the grand scheme of things, I'm really just a beginner at this and really just kind of using it as a learning process. Right now I'm in my dining room. Typically I'm working on amp builds down in my basement. I have a little workbench down there, but I brought everything up here just to kind of reorganize everything. It's a bit of a mess down there. The process of collecting all of the parts and getting all the parts together, it just kind of creates a lot of chaos. So I'm just trying to reorganize all that so that I can really start this amp build strong. Right now I've got almost all of the boards kind of built as far as the parts placed, but I'm going to start soldering those today. Slowly but surely. I say today, it might take a few days to really get all that nailed down, but that's kind of part of this process is I've been gathering parts over literally months of, buying parts, waiting for them to come in, and also just spacing out the cost. Even though a lot of the small parts don't cost a lot, things like transformers and, and different things, it all adds up. So just trying to space that out over the course of really the past, 6 to 9 months. I'm kind of following a build process that is laid out on the Amp Garage. There's a thread where a few people kind of chime in and say, like, this is the process that I do this first and then I do this next. It just kind of makes sense to them. So I found one that a lot of people seem to like, so I'm kind of going along with that. One of the first steps though is to solder all the boards, get all the boards ready to go, and go from there. So that's what I'm working on now. So the hole for this guy, the little 5-pin switch for the foot switch, isn't quite big enough. Actually don't have the appropriate size drill bit. Maybe beyond my better judgment, at least try to take a little bit off with this bit. Perfect. All right. Well, I say perfect. That works. Yeah. So that means I can get the foot switch wired up and we'll move on to the next thing. All right, so big update on the build. After a couple weeks, I was finally able to dig back into this. One night in particular, the first night that I kind of jumped back into it, I got a lot done on wiring up the power section here where the 6L6s will go. I got these resistors in and a lot of wires run for that. The FET board is in place. I just now have started wiring up this ground bus that's on the pots. The pots are all installed here. I don't even remember what all I've done since the last update, but definitely a lot of things going on. Oh, I don't even think the output transformer and the choke were installed last time. So all of these things have been stuff that I've done in the last week or so, just little by little, knocking them off the list. I have had to make a couple of other orders for parts that I either found that I didn't have quite the right part or just didn't have. Like one, for instance, is the light that goes on the front of the amp here. I either have misplaced that or didn't order it to begin with because I can't find it. So I'm having to order that. Just little things like that, just tedious. Figuring it out as I go. I've been posting several questions on the Amp Garage, just asking about certain things. One in particular actually is this half power switch that I've installed right here. If you can see that in between these two power amp tubes. Typically that always goes on the back panel, but this chassis actually doesn't have a place for it on the back panel. And rather than drill, I actually used a existing hole that's in between here, but I wasn't sure if that was a good location for it, if that, you know, might not be the best for some reason or another, but people seem to think that that was okay, so I've installed it there. My hope with this process is that I would just learn a lot about amps in general and learn how they work, and that's definitely been the case. Any little thing that I run into, I go and, you know, search and read up on, even if it's the kind of resistor or the kind of cap that's in a certain place. And I just see people's experiences and see people's questions where they've asked, you know, something about that part of the amp or about, you know, the input or about the pots or whatever. And I'm learning a ton. And, you know, obviously there's a lot to weed through there, but it's all been part of the process for me and something that I've really enjoyed. I know that's not for everyone, and a kit might be better for some people who just don't want to worry about all the nuance and all the details and just want to enjoy the experience of building an amp. This is definitely taking a lot longer than I thought it might. I, you know, kind of deep down hope to use this amp for a gig this weekend. This is the middle of October now, but as you can see, I'm far from that. The last update was in October of 2022, and now it is early February. I haven't really been able to work on the amp that much the back half of last year. I was gone, I was on the road, I wasn't able to work on this at all until about mid-January. I got back and had a little time here and there to start working on it. So big update today. I have all of the front control panel wired up. For the most part, there's a couple of wires that will go to the board once that's installed. A lot of the relay stuff is wired up as far as the relays are in there. V1 and V2 are somewhat wired up now. There'll be a few more things to add in there as we continue. But the big thing today is that I'm finally to the point where I can start putting these boards in. That's the big main board and the power supply board. This is really when it will start to take shape and actually look like it's about, you know, it's about there. Today I'm going to work on that for a little while, and then hopefully over the next couple days or over the next week or two, that stuff will all get wired in. The tricky thing with this is just that I've got a lot of these wires already on the board here. That's kind of, from what I can tell, is a good way to go about it for the most part. You can see there's like spider webs on this thing. I can tell it's been a while since I've worked on it. So I'll have to kind of clean this off, but this is backwards. So yeah, today is a big day. I've been looking forward to this day of actually starting to put these boards in and wire them up. So I guess I'm just gonna start in this top right-hand corner and then work my way around. And this kind of project is not for the impatient. I mean, I think I've talked about this at some point. It's just like, even the little things, they just take a while and you wanna be really careful and do it right. But it is pretty therapeutic too. Now I'm working on the preamp tubes here, and one thing that you'll see people talk about over and over again is that the wiring here really matters, just the length of the wire and even where the wire is placed, the way that it's running. There's a lot of places in the amp over here that, you know, it can introduce noise, or it just isn't the best for tone. And to help with this, one thing that I'm doing is I'm referencing some photos of this actual amp that Dumble built. You can see, you know, which way he ran the wires. You can see, you know, how they cross over or which way they're routed and everything. So I'm trying to do that. It's really helpful. just to kind of know, is this okay? Is this going to make it noisy? Just another way to make sure that it's going to sound as good as it can. This is really exciting just because it is like the amp's actually starting to take shape. I mean, it's starting to look like an actual amp with the board in there, and getting these wires all tidied up, just starting to look a lot neater and look really good. All right, the last solder joint until I can fire this thing up. Fortunately, I don't think I'm gonna be able to plug it in tonight, or I guess I could, I'm too tired. It'll be a whole process to double check everything, test it, plug it in, etc., but I think she's done. All right, we're gonna see if there's any shorts in the amp. This is kind of the first test stage, kind of the first thing I got to do to make sure I did everything right. So let's cross our fingers. We should see this light come on bright, and then it will go down. If it goes bright and stays bright, or goes down and then comes back up bright, that's not a good thing. We want it to be bright initially and then go down in brightness. So let's see what it does. Here we go. All right, that's what we want. Seems to be staying there. Switch to standby on. Yep, I think that's what we want there. That's a good sign. It's a really good sign. I heard the relays. So yeah, now we're gonna get it up to full voltage and test some things before we put tubes in. All right, I've got the amp hooked up to a speaker cabinet. I've got all the tubes in. We're ready to go. I'm nervous, but very excited too. I mean, I've been working on this thing for over a year. A lot of time, a lot of research, a lot of figuring things out and learning, just a lot of work, and it's all kind of coming down to this right here. Yeah, I'm excited and nervous. I'm hoping that everything works and sounds like it should. Obviously with these amps, there is some tweaking that goes into it. You know, there are certain things that you're gonna want to tweak or change and see how it sounds and all of that. But right now I'm just crossing my fingers that everything works. You know, we're not getting anything crazy weird or weird noises or, you know, all the stuff that can go wrong. We're just hoping that it, you know, fires up right. All right, I got tubes lighting up. Those look good, all 4 tubes. All right, let's take it off standby. Oh man, I'm hearing some hiss from the speaker. That's a good sign, nothing weird. Yep, turning up the master, getting a little more noise, but I mean, honestly, for a 100 watt amp, that's really quiet. Cranked all the way up. So now I just need to check the bias. Right now I just had the bias pot set kind of in the middle, but yeah, I'm gonna set the bias really quick after it warms up for a few minutes, and we'll plug it in. Oh man, this is amazing. All right, let's plug it in. I think I got the bias set in a good spot. It's, again, might experiment with that a little more, but yeah, I'm gonna give it a shot. Yeah, the amp is quiet. If I roll the guitar volume down, I'm not getting that buzz. So I think that might just be my room, but we'll figure that out. But man, it's working. It is working. All right, so I've been playing the amp for the last hour or so, and I have to say it sounds really great, and I haven't had any issues with it, surprisingly, as complicated as this build has been, and as much as I didn't know going into it. I'm super happy that it's working, and everything is working. I mean, the relays for the channel switching and all of that stuff, the effects loop is working, all the switches on the front, that wiring, especially in the front panel for the rock and the jazz switch and the mid and the bright cap, all of that stuff was kind of tedious and really, really small, really tight. So I am super pumped that everything on the amp is working. For me, building this amp has been a huge process, a big learning process, a lengthy just time process, all kinds of stuff that I've talked about in this video kind of along the way. Honestly, I don't even remember everything that I've talked about and discussed on video because I've been making this video for over a year. But I have learned a ton in the process, and I know that I'm going to continue to learn more as I tweak this amp, as I change some change different things out and try different things. There is a lot here in this amp, and somebody like Dumble, who was an expert and a master at his craft, I'm not going to be able to crack that in a year. I mean, he worked for decades mastering his sound, his techniques, the way that he built amplifiers. So I by no means was trying to accomplish that in a year's time, but I am super happy with the results. This amp already sounds fantastic, and hopefully it'll just get better. My process with this amp is going to continue. I'm going to continue to learn the amp and tweak the amp, but in the future there will be more videos featuring this amp. After it gets settled in a little more and maybe I do a little more tweaking, I want to do a full-on demo video of the amp with a full track demo as well as some soloed out clips like I usually do in a lot of my videos. And then also just kind of talking about the amp, and of those of you out there who might be kind of curious about this style of amp, a 124 Dumble clone, hopefully those future videos will give you a better idea of what this amp can do and what it can sound like if you decide to build one yourself. That's going to do it for this one. Finally done with this video, a year in the making. If you stuck around this far, thank you. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I'm going to be doing more content on this amp, maybe some more amp builds in the future, etc., etc. You know how that works. Hit subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. All right, until next time, I'll see you out there.
Bye.